crowdsourcing helps a business. Now, I can't say that Pfizer is a scrappy organization, so I'll scratch that as a way that we're going to use crowdsourcing. And I can't predict the future. If I did, I probably wouldn't be here today. So I'll scratch that. But the two case studies I'll talk about today, the one is really an example of using crowdsourcing as a way of building our brand and spreading our workload. And then the second case study would be more about getting elegant solutions to complex problems, in both cases applied to the pharma industry. So some of you may or may not know the story of sildenafil citrate. It's probably not known to you as sildenafil citrate, but rather as Viagra. Now, what you may or may not know is Viagra was actually designed as a cardiovascular drug. We invested many years of research and many millions of dollars, only to find out when we tested this in males, it had no cardiovascular event. And so as we get ready to shut down that clinical trial, we found that some of the male patients were saying, hey, actually, would you mind if I kept some of those pills? And again, probably through a very innovative customer surveillance, they realized there was a side effect to Viagra. Again, mechanism based on a very specific enzyme that sildenafil citrate blocked that we thought was important for cardiovascular, had other, let's just say, attractive side effects. So the rest, as I say, is history. It's been launched as $1 billion drug for us, and worldwide sales last year, 1.8 billion. So Viagra was a case of serendipity. But the question was, could you organize a business model around more methodical finding of serendipitous findings? Because if you engineer, as we do, a molecule to block an enzyme, it may be like with Viagra, that enzyme isn't good for what you thought it was going to be good for. But if the agent itself is non-toxic, is there other ways you can use that for other diseases? Or in the case, for example, of oncology, maybe it fails in one type of cancer but it's worthwhile in others. So the view was, if there's one thing that Pfizer has, because of our size, is we have more failed clinical candidates than any other company in the world, which is, I guess, something to be proud of, something not to be proud of. The idea was many of those did not fail for toxicity. Many of those failed like Viagra because they didn't work what the original mechanism was. And so we created this group called the Indications Discovery Group. And their remit was really to do a lot of preclinical work and eventually clinical work to take either existing assets that we're making money off of now and try to find new indications or new combinations or whole new uses for them. So it's a group around 50, and we believe that, so this is their little logo over there. But we think that Pfizer is the first company that actually built a unit like this inside of their own corporation. There are other biotechs that try to coerce agents out of big pharma, but I think Pfizer felt that for our size, we should do this ourselves. So recently, we've started to extend this investigation of our own drugs to other organizations. So one example for this year, we announced that at Washington University in St. Louis, we're going to give them access to all the clinical data and all of the research data preclinically for all of our compounds. Initially blinded, because there's a lot of intellectual property in there, but they'll get profiles, that maybe the code number is taken out, but they'll get the actual data. If they have a hypothesis of how these agents could be reused or recycled, and again, if they're sensible, we'll fund that research. Similarly, if they think they have new indications or new combinations of use and so on. So this model is a model we're rolling out now. We rolled it out to WashU in part because we had a St. Louis location, we had great relationships with WashU. We've had a number of other universities now who've asked us for that similar access to this data-rich set. So I won't talk anything more about that, but if anybody has any interest in that, Don Frail is the CEO, or I should say the Chief Science Officer of the group within Pfizer that leads that. So something we do that most people don't know of. In fact, if I had to take sort of a hand vote, how many people here know that if you request a sample of any Pfizer drug and have a sensible purpose for it, Pfizer will give that away to you for free? How many people know that? Well, it's true. If you visit our Pfizer website and you go up here into research and development, there's a thing called the Compound Transfer Program. What we basically say is that if you think you have a new use for Lipitor, Chantix, Viagra, Celebrex, and you can justify it scientifically. It isn't like your cousin Louis seeing to get some Viagra pills, but this is research grade samples, sometimes milligrams, sometimes grams, but if the case is compelling enough, we will pay for clinical supplies. The idea being that there are many more scientists who, when they look at our assets, may come up with very different things that we come up with. So we've given away over 36,000 samples over the last 10 years. We continue to do that. So for us, again, the idea was that rather than us coming up with all the crazy ideas and us implementing them, by simply making our material available, we can let other scientists experiment. There's a huge amount of failure in our business, so if they take 10 milligrams, do a study, doesn't work, no harm, no foul. If something works, part of the condition is that you get Pfizer right of first refusal. So what's the problem with such a great system? Well, the problem is, first of all, as judged by this room, nobody knows about it. Not enough people know about it. Certainly those people who find out about it don't forget about it. But we had two problems, besides the lack of awareness. One is that there's other ways of getting sampled. So for example, Pfizer wants a Merck sample. We don't tend to ask Merck for it, we just tend to synthesize it ourselves. And for other companies, they'll go either internally or externally have samples made. And as we came to find out, there's actually a cottage industry, which is now a very big cottage, of 50 to 100 companies who are actually synthesizing Pfizer products without a license and selling them as research-grade samples. Now again, we didn't really focus on that too much because there are people who actually counterfeit the Pfizer pills. We go after those people. They make drugs on a kiloton scale, sell them as authentic Pfizer pills. That's a whole different level of infringement. But here it was almost like people were saying it's kind of like a victimless crime, it's small, it can't be worth that much money. But the big risk for us was, if these samples are impure, or if they are not the right agent, and you go to do studies with them, you say it fails, then it actually could be a flawed experiment. Or similarly, if we try to validate a study based on a flawed sample and can't reproduce that, we create so much work for ourselves, it's just not worth it. So because of all these things, we also, again, not to remember that the money that would be made by selling these samples is actually tiny. If we get a new indication for a drug like Viagra, it's $1.8 billion, there's a huge amount of value by finding early on in the life cycle of a patent that these agents have other utilities, whether it's a new indication or combination. So when these marketplaces erupted, selling unlicensed versions of that, we were missing out on long-term value, we were missing out on short-term value, and certainly creating more work as we had to explain to the FDA why so-and-so did a study that nobody else could reproduce. So to give you a sample of how audacious this is, we've got a letter like this, which is from somebody who bought one of our samples called Sutent. This chemical name is called sunitinib. And they would buy it from somebody else. Now that particular compound is actually very light and unstable. It's very, if you solubilize it, it's in the solution very unstable. So we would give ordinarily instructions how to store it, how to create solutions of it. When you don't, again, you have these kind of sort of frightening emails that people who don't know what they're doing are then testing these things and then generating data that, again, won't likely add up to much. So what did we do? Well, we decided, in some ways, I would say if you can't beat them, join them. The idea was we had commercial suppliers who had a marketing and sales distribution network already established, and they simply wanted access to our material. They wanted a license from us to sell research-grade versions to academicians, biotechs, and other big pharma companies. So we signed a deal with two companies, Sigma Aldrich and Tokras. They're 5-year deals. It was actually kind of interesting because originally they wanted a license to make. I was telling them about it somewhere at lunch today. I was joking that we will spill more Lipitor in Ireland. We're making it in kiloton scale than these guys allowed me to make. So I said, why don't we just transfer samples that we don't need anymore to these commercial suppliers? They package and resell, but we just collect the check every quarter. So it seemed like a very sweet deal to us. So key to that was now, we can now make available to the marketplace. People can still get it for free from Pfizer. Those who want to submit to our terms with CDA, but if you're not, for whatever reason, going to get it for free, by creating a licensed, authentic suppliers that show that the purity and identity is there, it actually does, we think, reduce the incentive for an unlicensed supplier. So if they see that Pfizer will automatically commercialize every research tool, every intermediate, every metabolite that we think does not harm Pfizer, then your incentive to make a Pfizer compound may be low enough that you'll go after a Merck compound or a BMS compound. That'll be their problem. But the key thing is, and actually a separate talk for 7 days, is the revenue generation. As part of my role as sort of the entrepreneur at Pfizer, we're now looking to monetize modified mouse models we've generated, antibodies we've generated, assets that we've created at high cost to Pfizer that are no longer needed. The view being now that, getting back now to long-term value, through these commercial partnerships, we're actually having these companies advertise our compound transfer program. So what you see here, I guess I lied, I guess the digital one structure. But this is our phase 3 candidate. It's a new anti-arthritis treatment. It's already got somewhere between 20 and 40 unlicensed suppliers in the market. So you got to move quickly once you do close the structure. What we've asked them to do is, even though we're not allowing them to sell it, Tokras, we're actually giving them a hyperlink back to our compound transfer program, so that using their commercial access to the marketplace, they will shunt more people back to Pfizer to get free samples, which again generate more long-term value for Pfizer. So if you think about it, the decision to do this wasn't easy. In fact, when David mentioned, or one of the speakers mentioned, when you have an asset that nobody owns, to get permission to monetize it is an incredibly long journey. And to go through